So his title would be Connectivity in Africa. Mr. Ryall is responsible for the edge strategy for Meta. I believe that is Facebook. This includes with team partnering with ISPs and focusing on peering and caching in the region to ensure that people using our products or their products get the best experience possible. Before Meta, Ben was a technology director at Data at 6 Degrees, very interesting name, Data at 6 Degrees, VC-backed, venture capital-backed UK-based MSP. And Ben is also the chair of Peering DB Outreach Community, OC. And second panelist will be Dr. Amreesh Phoker. Am I saying that correct? All right, thank you. And Dr. Phoker has joined the Internet Society in April 2021 as an internet measurement and data expert, focusing on internet measurements and shutdowns. Yesterday, he had an opportunity to make a question that probably Ethiopians would be afraid to ask, but he did ask it for us. Internet shutdowns, again, internet is not a privilege, it is a right. So he will be talking about that. And he also is, prior to that, he was a research manager at Africa NIC, leading research in internet security and measurements and championing NPKI. I don't know what exactly that means, but I believe it has something to do with private key infrastructure. And then DNSSEC, which is a secured version of the DNS service. He holds a PhD in computer science from the University of Cape Town. He's also active in academia with numerous publications and conference roles. He's based in Mauritius and he enjoys watercolor painting and scuba diving. I have no idea what this is. Ben, I forgot to mention, Ben is originally from the UK and he is residing in California. Am I right? And first question to him was when he told me he resides in California, you can guess what my first question was. Is your house safe? And he said, it is safe. So with that, I would like to invite Ben, the first speaker, to the podium, and please join me with an applaud. And we know time is short, so I'm going to cut their time. Originally, it was set for 25 minutes. I only would give him 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, an hour and a half of slides now is what you're saying. So it's great to be back in Addis. It's my second time here. I was actually here just before COVID in March 2020 at the first Internet Development Conference. So it's great to be back, great to see some familiar faces. As mentioned, my day job is I'm Edge Strategy Manager at Meta. And so really looking after our CDN and working with partners across Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeastern Europe and Central Asia, delivering the Meta product family, so Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Today though, kind of, I guess, stepping in a little bit, I'm going to be talking a little bit about connectivity trends in Africa. And actually for this, going to be using some data from telegeography. Yeah, cool. So thinking about connectivity to the continent, this has come up in a few presentations already. Obviously, the continent, like elsewhere in the world, is heavily reliant on subsea. And as demand grows, we need new systems. We need new systems which bring diversity, but also bring capacity. And so you can see here, you know, there's a number of planned and recent landings that have happened across the continent. Highest number of landings kind of up in that east-northeast corner, but there is a similar number of landings on the west side, but more geographically spread out. And when we dig into the details there, the slides will be shared, I'm sure, so this is really for reference. There's a number of new cable systems that have landed, bringing diversity, like I mentioned. One we're involved in from Meta, obviously to Africa, the consortium cable, that's landing in a number of new places to bring, not only resilience, but additional capacity on the newer design systems that are able to support more fiber pairs and therefore more overall capacity. We heard this as we talked through the last sessions as well about the importance of connecting to Europe. And you still see that particularly North Africa is heavily reliant on connecting to Europe, but also you see that from kind of Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and that's kind of indicated on this chart. What is interesting though, over the time, particularly for sub-Saharan Africa, the resilience, the reliance on connecting back to Europe has slowly dropped over time. And you can see that on the blue line on this chart here. What that really means is, whilst connectivity back to Europe is important, as providers build out to the continent, then actually people are able to build inter-region connectivity and intercontinent connectivity, which is really good for localization and really good for resilience. And what you see with something like To Africa is people are now looking at building resilience for their services they have within Africa, and actually over time dropping their capacity they have to Europe because they just no longer need that. So back in 2021, because there's so much content in Europe and because there's still providers building out in Africa, CDNs and other kind of networks, then, a lot of people taking their connectivity to Europe, and that's where they relied on. What we've seen over time is that trend has started to change. So 2023, you can start to see some kind of almost hub routes, certainly on the East Africa side, going between South Africa and Kenya. And then you see that develop further when you look at like 2024 data, really starting to see Djibouti pop up as a hub that's been talked about. You've got Kenya, you've got Nigeria, you've still got South Africa. And really now there's connectivity emerging in the continent, as well as having that some reliance on going back to Europe. And like I say, you've seen operators evolve their thinking of not only connecting just to something in Africa and then going back to Europe, but now actually thinking about connecting something in Africa and having the DR as something else in Africa. Obviously, I can see it's just pointed out by my friends in towards the front. One thing it is missing as you look at this diagram maybe is a really solid path that's going east to west. Lots of people are looking at doing that, but that brings its own challenges, both geography, on which countries you go through, how to build that infrastructure, and then maintaining it in a reliable fashion. When you think about international IP connectivity in Africa, it really buckets into three groups. You've got kind of North Africa, which is really heavily resilient on still going to Europe. And that's kind of shown the data we've shown earlier. Locality is a factor that plays into that. Stating the obvious, but North Africa is quote unquote close to Europe versus South Africa. And as you go further down the continent, and then you see you've got your second group, major hubs, which are connecting Europe and Africa. And then you've got your third group. And when you're thinking about connectivity hubs, you can see the data on the slide here. The biggest ones at the moment are those markets which are being, developing, and those ecosystems that have been developing for some time. So you've got Johannesburg, Cape Town, Cairo, Nairobi, but you are now seeing some emerging and biggest gains, the biggest wins on new markets. Again, we're seeing, on this side, Nairobi, Djibouti, really starting to take their shape, and really those ecosystems are growing out. Pricing is another thing we talk about. When we think about pricing, historically, if you've had limited connectivity internationally and limited options in country, that's going to only really do one thing to price. As new providers have entered markets, as new cable systems come online, as new terrestrial routes have come in and been built, that really helps the price drive down. And you can see here from the charts that really, whilst certain like Kampala, Uganda is still very high, it is going down over time. And, those more developed markets are much more cost effective per megabit. So really what we're saying here is, as you get those ecosystems developed and you bring competition to those markets, that does one thing for kind of innovation and the ecosystem. The other important and interesting data point here is the cost of buying IP transit in a local market versus buying what's described in the industry as a pipe and port, buying a pipe back to Europe and buying IP transit there. Historically, you've seen that it's cheaper to buy IP transit in Europe rather than buying it in country, but that's now starting to swing around in a few markets. And you can see here kind of Johannesburg, Lagos, Nairobi, that's swung around the other way. And back to that, as you have new entrants into the market, you'll see that price and then start to swing around in other markets, meaning people can connect locally, which is good not only for resilience, but is also good for keeping traffic in continent. There was a comment earlier about accessing a website in Ethiopia and it going via Marseille. And that's something we're all here, I guess, to try and avoid and try and keep the traffic in continent and in country. Internet exchange points are another interesting factor. You can see here that we know there's IXs in this part of the world. We know there's an IX in Addis now, which is great. But as you see more ASs start to appear, so more network operators established, you see the growth for the opportunity for IXs to grow. Ideally, you're going to have more than one because you want resilience, but you need to start somewhere in a meaningful way and have networks connected and traffic exchanged. And past having just networks connected, it's making sure they know how to run their routing also at an IX. What you see a lot of times is people connect to an IX, but then don't know exactly which prefixes to announce, and maybe they miss ones that have customers in or similar, so you still risk traffic going out of Europe. So it's having the IXP development, but also the best practices for internet and network engineering. The other interesting one you overlay from the slide before, I'll go back. So this is showing internet exchange points across the continent, but the next slide actually shows a number of ASs kind of mapped by market. So you can see a trend of where you have the largest amount of ASs in a country that maps to how that IXP development's growing. And you also see that map to how some of the other stats we're looking at about transit pricing in the country. So it's really, when you think about this part of the continent, massive opportunity as networks get established to bring what we're seeing elsewhere to this part of the continent. There's an interesting question that I got asked before as well about CDNs and where does the CDNs fit into this. Working at one of the CDN providers, we try and localize our traffic as much as possible. And that practically means that we'll try and get our infrastructure we control as close to people as possible. We have a couple of ways in the Meta tool set we can do that. That's either peering at one of our backbone connected POPs. The nearest one to here is Mombasa. But we also have, South Africa and Nigeria and Egypt. But we also have a Meta network appliance in-network caching program. So as a network operator or as an IX operator, you can get one of these appliances connected either inside your network or at your IX, and that helps to offload traffic locally within your network. So what that might mean when you use a Meta product family in Ethiopia is you might see the initial request go out of country. But if you look at the page you get back, you might see some of the content on that page is actually served from within the country, enabling, traffic to be delivered locally and saving everything to go out of country. Data centers, looking at my friends and Wingu sitting in the front, there's a great carrier neutral site here. 50 minutes left. I've seen that, perfect. It's great to see carrier neutral data centers, and that's something that, when we're looking at our network builds out, that's something we heavily look at. And again, thinking as you have more ASs and more IXs, you're seeing that same growth of multiple data centers in different markets. And, competition is good for lots of players in the market. Generally, when people start expanding into carrier neutral data centers, once they get past the first initial step, then they actually want DR and they want to move all of their equipment off-prem and put it into multiple data centers. So you're seeing that kind of reflected here. I can see it down there now. You can see that reflected here and how we're having growth come out. Great slide here that's really interesting when you think about data centers across the continent. There is a great carrier neutral site in Ethiopia, but not every country, when they talk about this, means carrier neutral. Many are carrier owned, and some of the negatives maybe with carrier owned data centers is it's not the equal cost for everyone to get in. And so it's why one of the reasons the metric tracked here is about carrier neutrality and having those carrier neutral data centers where everyone can build in on an equal framework. excuse me, looking ahead, thinking in the future, access to capacity, both in Ethiopia and for this region. Landlocked countries have the challenge that they need to rely on terrestrial to get that first leg, and seeing that further development and further growth is going to be great. Less dependency on Europe, but I guess you could also swing that conversation to less dependency on other parts of the continent and bring in that content and bring in that capacity local. And, considering the, excuse me, considering the continuation of carrier neutral data center expansion and also network expansion to support the growth in country. One free marketing slide, I guess, for telegeography, because I'm using their content. They published two maps, if you've not seen. One is that submarine cable map, great resource I use, map subsea cables. They also now map in cloud infrastructure. So two maps that are publicly accessible, you can go and review. And when the slides are shared, I've included Patrick's details, but thank you. Sorry, it's a bit rushed, but thanks.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that insightful and educative presentation. Please join me once more to applaud him. And like I said earlier, competition and government facilitation in all aspects is important for the development of internet and internet-based services. So that's what Ben emphasized in his, I think, last slide. Not only just one data center, but we need many more. And competition is the only way to advance, accelerate the development. Our next speaker, Dr. Amreesh Phoker, please join me in welcoming him to the stage. He will be talking about internet resilience in sub-Saharan region, and in particular, lessons learned from the 2024 cable cut. I had no idea that happened, but I'm willing to learn. Thanks so much, and floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here, first time in Addis. It's a very welcoming place, so I'm super glad to be here. Perhaps I should talk about power resilience instead of internet resilience, because with what we have seen today. But you know what? Without power, the internet wouldn't work. So it is actually an important topic. Okay, let's dive in. So today I'm going to talk about some cable cuts that happen both on the east coast and on the west coast of Africa. And it has impacted a lot of countries. And also, we are going to talk about why resilience is important. This is just an example, a few examples of actual people's lives being impacted. For example, we have Kafui, I think in Ghana, where she had a restaurant, and all of a sudden, because of the cable cut, obviously internet was not accessible, and there was a big reduction in the number of orders she would have for her restaurant. It's the same for Senu in Ivory Coast, or Benjamin in Liberia, where their lives were impacted because they couldn't actually do their business or daily dwellings on the internet. So let's first look at the West Africa internet outage, which happened in March last year. So on March 14th, there was a suspected rock slide close to Ivory Coast, and this basically impacted a few cables. As you can see here, the ACE cable, the SAT3, the WAX, and the main one. What was happening is that all the cables concentrate in one specific place before being distributed to different countries in West Africa. And the landslide, the underwater landslide happened over there, breaking multiple cables and therefore affecting 13 countries in West Africa. So these are the countries that were affected in Africa for that outage. And as you can see, obviously, the coastal countries are affected, but you can see also the landlocked countries like Niger, Burkina Faso were also affected. Of course, because these countries, they rely on their neighboring coastal seaborne countries for international capacity. One might say, why don't they use internal links? But sometimes they are non-existent. I'm not sure there are links between Niger and Algeria, for example. It's a desert over there anyway. But having more intercontinental links would eventually help in mitigating those cases of submarine cable cuts. So if we have a look at the internet traffic in, we took 4 countries here. As you can see, Liberia, the internet traffic dropped almost to none. So basically people were having trouble accessing the internet over there. In Côte d'Ivoire, there was a little bit of traffic. It means that they were able to use alternative path, but a lot of traffic went down anyway. In Ghana, it was bad. And in Niger, it was more or less okay. So basically they managed to recover, technically using other links, perhaps with other countries. But let's have a look at what's happening. Why are those countries, why did we see a drop, a so drastic drop in the amount of traffic? So normally people, when accessing the internet, they would want to go to see their most favorite websites, right? So we did a study at the Internet Society looking at content locality. So we took the top 1,000 most popular websites in a country, and then we decided to see where is the content being fetched from, or where is the content located. Is the content located, is being served by a local cache within the country, or is it being served externally? And as you can see here for Liberia, very little websites out of those 1,000 websites are actually hosted locally. The rest is external. External meaning going to Europe or going to US using external links. Obviously, with a cable cut, no internet for Liberia. Moving on, for Niger, more or less the same. Quite a low level of locally cached content. And this is what we need to change in the future. Try to bring more CDNs and more content caching locally, whether it is CDNs or whether it is homegrown cloud providers, as we have seen here in Ethiopia. We need more of that so that we have more local content cache. So redundancy is important, of course. The more links you have, whether it is terrestrial links or submarine links, the better. So you need to also be diversifying your connectivity path. For example, you need multiple cable landing stations in country, and not only one where this might become a single point of failure. Local operators should use cross-border terrestrial fiber links to route their traffic whenever possible. And it's good to see, I've heard today that Ethiopia has links not only to Djibouti, but also to Kenya and to Somalia as well. So this is good. This is going in the right direction. Now, moving on to the East Africa internet outage that happened in May. So 2 fiber optic cables were broken. These were SECOM and EASY, and this was due to phishing activities. Again, several countries were affected. And also it took quite a long time for them to repair those cables, because there are probably 1 or 2 repair ships that circle Africa. And obviously cable cuts and repair is a very demanding job. So it usually take multiple weeks for these to get fixed. Let's have a look at Ethiopia for the content locality. We see a little bit of locally cache content or locally hosted content, which is great. We need to see more of that. And again, how do we do that? Either we create the right enabling environment for the big providers and the CDNs to come and place their content. So let's think about Cloudflare, Akamai, and other CDN providers to come and place their content. Or the local community can think about creating more cloud operators to help bring those content back to the country. Look at your neighbor, Kenya. Kenya is doing much better in terms of the distribution of local versus external. As you can see, a lot of those providers are there, Cloudflare, Akamai, Microsoft are local, and a few of them are external. So the idea would be actually to balance out the amount of local versus external. By reducing the amount of external, you will be less affected in cases of a cable cut, for example. Tanzania has also a very similar profile because, as you mentioned earlier, there are a few operators there, and this is creating the right dynamic for content to be cached. So locally cached content has the two advantages. First, of redundancy, because in cases of outages, you can still have access to your content somehow, but it also reduces latency, so better user experience, but also cheaper. It's usually cheaper to have a connection to a data center locally than external. When the outage happened in East Africa, what we have seen this is, I think, ticks from Tanzania. We have also seen that on the local internet exchange, there has also been a drop in traffic. So you would ask, so if an internet exchange point is actually to exchange traffic locally, but if there is a cable cut, why has there been a drop in the traffic? But that's actually interesting, because what was happening is that, for example, there's Akamai or other CDNs there. Those CDNs, they rely on international connectivity to constantly fill their caches. So they need to remain live. And when there was the cable cut, Akamai or Cloudflare say, oh, those caches cannot be filled anymore because I do not have an external connectivity. And basically they were turned off. By being turned off, we also have seen a drop in traffic at the IXP. So this is a research work that we want to conduct at the Internet Society going forward, is what is the impact of those outages on locally cached content and locally cached services. So that's not a myth anymore. A large majority of traffic is going through submarine cables. We used to say 99%. It's still probably true, maybe 90% now, because we have a little bit more connectivity over satellite and also with the coming of LEOs. But Africa as a whole will rely tremendously on submarine cables. And in the future, what we would need is to reduce that reliance on submarine cables, grow our ecosystem so that we have more content cache locally, also make the market an enabling place to attract players. So to conclude, redundancy is important. We need to invest into more IXPs, more carrier neutral data centers, because these work together. And again, bring the players together. By creating that environment, we will see a drop in prices as well, and make things better for the users. Human networks is very key. So we would like the community to be engaged, and also to create the ways forward. So the demand should also come from the community, and also tell us that you need better services, tell us that you need more redundant services, tell us that you need cheaper services. So when we have the demand, there will be more pressure to get things done. There will be obviously more cables coming, and this is good news. But obviously, more cables would also mean more cable cuts because the probability might increase. So it's all a balanced thing that we are looking for. More connectivity internally as well. That would be awesome. So at the Internet Society, we have a dashboard and a platform called Pulse, where you have a lot of metrics about the health of the internet. So I would encourage you to visit this platform. Have a look at your country profile, at the resilience index of your country, and try to get some information about how to improve things. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and happy to take questions during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phoker. Now I invite Ben again back to the stage for a Q&A session. And we'll try to be brief. I will start the questions, but I will open it for the audience as well. All right, thank you again. So my questions are very simple, and actually you can share the same question for both of you. So during your involvement in all these efforts in the region, I would like to learn about the challenges you faced, the method solutions you followed to overcome them, and also in your experience, what needs to be done by the various stakeholders, be it government or the private sector role players, what needs to be done to accelerate the development of internet in the region so that we can catch up with the rest of the world as fast as possible. I will start with you, Ben.
It's a good question. Thank you. Managed to turn the mic on. So I think the great thing that we've seen in a number of markets is competition, like multiple operators drives innovation in both products, pricing, service. And so it'd be great, as you think about this market and other markets, to see more providers able to establish and sell their services and deliver their services, not only using low orbit satellites, not only using radio, but fixed line as well. Looking at markets where fixed line is more higher percentage, we know that users who have a fixed line connection, because of the way they can generally, bandwidth is higher, but also pricing is slightly different to mobile data. They use more data and they're online more. So really having fixed line users generates more traffic overall and then drives all of the things we're thinking about in the ecosystem, but bringing people online and giving them options.
Thank you. So I think we should adopt maybe a layered approach. There are many aspects of internet, I would say internet provisioning, that can be optimized. For example, having a whole sector taking care of the dark fiber connections, for example, and then having shared infrastructure. So all these things that can bring down the cost of infrastructure, because usually this is a huge element to factor in, especially on the CapEx side. So if things can be mutualized, a lot of cost saving can be done, and this can be trickled down to the end user. A more affordable connectivity means obviously more usage. More usage would then also create the demand for having data center being operated locally. Again, we talked about having carrier neutral data centers, which acts as catalysts in terms of bringing more stakeholders on the same platform rather than having carrier own data centers. So these are examples that worked perfectly well in other markets, let's say in South Africa. And we need to bring back those good practices in developing countries. And this is the only way that I can see that things can get better over time.
Thank you so much, both of you. Now it's the audience's turn. I will give a chance to the first 5 hands, and we will have probably only one session. So anyone who's going to take the first chance? I think everybody is hungry, you want to go to the lunch. All right, one over there.
Tasting? Tasting. Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm Ralph Rahom. I'm the wholesale head of Wingu for Wingu Group. So perhaps one question to the doctor. If you look at the split of the CDNs, so one of the key things is that the CDNs, it takes a while for them to come. What do you see as the drivers for CDNs to come into Africa? And secondly, why is there a number of them that just chooses not to come? Why is there a number of them that chooses not to come at this stage in time?
So basically the CDNs, it's taking too long for them to come and have their local edge data centers. Why is that? If I got it right? Yes, thank you. And I saw somebody else. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Meoli Kashodra from Kenneth in Kenya. I think the presentation on the internet shutdown seemed to have left out the shutdown near Yemen, which is closer to Ethiopia. I wonder whether that was also studied because it went on for a long time through 2024. And then for the meta person, the metric you use for bringing caches is about lots of traffic, you know. Is it possible to have different metrics for different parts of the world? Or do you use one metric, say 5 gig of traffic or 10 gig of traffic in order to bring a cache into the country?
Did you get? Okay. Any more? I see one more.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, my name is Alfred Kitai from Kenya. I'm a network engineer and an entrepreneur. Wanted to ask about, you talked about internet resilience, and we've seen market entrants in the ISP space using new technologies like low Earth orbit satellites. What role do you think those providers have in supporting internet resilience when we have fiber cuts using their new technologies? Thank you.
Right. Okay. Any more? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. Once more, I just have one question that I want to ask, specifically with the internet cable cuts that were there. I just wanted to know what was the response time and what were the critical determining factors to restore connectivity? I think there is something that we can learn from there if there would be similar experiences in the future. So maybe if you could emphasize on that. And also, do you have any recommendations for how we should establish stakeholder collaborations, especially in ensuring that the internet infrastructure is resilient? Because as we know, there have been recent seismic activity, especially in Ethiopia, and also when it deals with these terrestrial infrastructures, what could be done to improve the stakeholder collaboration so that we can make these infrastructures more resilient towards these events? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any more? I think I see one hand over there.
Thank you. My name is Melody from the Cybersecurity Association. My question is regarding to the connectivity about the African region. As I have said, the African countries' connectivity
highly depends on the submarine cables. Almost 99% of the African countries depends on these submarine cables. What about the other non-communicables? As you mentioned, whenever the cable is cut, the impact is huge, economically, socially, etc. So what about the satellite and other issues for the African state?
Thank you so much. That was the last. Doctor, you want to go first? Or
So yeah, thank you for the questions. I'll dip into some of the answers and then I'll feel free to chime in or we can take turns. So for the question about cache deployments or the meta network appliances, we don't only look exclusively at traffic, and we do have different levels depending on the country and the market. One of the metrics we look at is quality of experience. So really that means what's the experience the people in the country are getting right now? Like, is the core quality good? Does the video stall? And how much would a cache deployment improve that? And what's the ecosystem like already? So for example, by that, if you're a network operator that's saying Cape Town, and you ask for an M&A to be put into Cape Town where we have a POP, then maybe we'd have a higher bar before we deploy. If you're somewhere like Ethiopia or more of a landlocked country, and then maybe the bar would be lower. But there isn't a one size that meets all for that one. Cable cuts and resilience. Whilst maybe without my meta hat on, some of the new cable systems that are being built are trying to get round past some of the known seismic systems. And so what you'll see is the newer cable that are being laid at such a way that they're trying to avoid these known points. Doesn't obviously mean other points won't come up in the future, but that people are learning on faults that happen when these new cables designed and built. And faults for subsea systems are really interesting. When you have a fault that's identified and when you know where that fault is, you then need someone to go and fix that. There's only actually a limited number of ships in the world that can go and fix these. You can track them, you can see where they are. So if you've happened to be unlucky with have a cable fault and all of the other ships are far away fixing something else, there's a lead time essentially for them to fix whatever they're working on, sell back to dock, restock with equipment, and then sell to the new location. And that really can, change how fast or how slow a cable gets fixed.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll take the questions on resilience and LEO satellites. I think we had two questions. That's a good question because obviously we have seen a lot of deployment of LEO satellites and a lot of more coverage happening. Actually, a colleague of mine is going to talk about LEO satellites and the opportunity it represents, but also of maybe oncoming challenges because there's only one operator of LEO satellite at the moment. So it means some concentration in the hands of the few. So we need to be aware of that. But definitely it can help in situation. For example, when we had the war in Ukraine, Starlink helped a lot to provide connectivity. We have many other countries where Starlink is actually providing quite a decent alternative link to traditional links that the country have. We recently did a study on Kazakhstan where most of the traffic, well, actually most of the link go through Russia. And we know how unpredictable Russia can be and how dependent Kazakhstan they. Hello? Oh, there we go. Yeah. But there was a ban. Kazakhstan's government decided to ban Starlink from operating. So one might wonder, it might be difficult for those LEO operators to actually come and provide their services because their infrastructure is completely different. They probably need a license to operate in the country, but they don't need any infrastructure in the country. And this might cause a bit of trouble, especially with the traditional way of thinking that in case I need to control the internet, I need to have access to the infrastructure. And the LEO satellites are actually changing the paradigm quite considerably. So maybe I'm moving next to the question we had on the cloud providers and what can bring them in. So on the cloud providers, there is an interesting finding that we've seen while doing that study. So Iran, as you know, is a lot under embargo. So a lot of American companies, the big players, cannot be there. But yet they have a very high level of locally cached content. So the fact that big companies cannot come in, the local ecosystem made it in such a way that there have been multiple local cloud providers creating the right ecosystem to locally cache content. And this is a good example, I think. Obviously, we need the big players to come because we need them to create a very dynamic environment. But we should also leave the space for homegrown cloud providers to operate and provide services locally. Then perhaps government services can also rely on those local cloud providers to host their content and make sure using in IXPs, for example, that content and the traffic remains local. We had a question on Yemen. I don't have too much to say about that, but I know the Internet Society has tracked that shutdown on the Internet shutdown page. So you might have a bit more detail about this. And we usually do an analysis of what were the causes and how long did it last. And we also have a tool to estimate the economic impact. So yesterday I talked about a shutdown that happened in Ethiopia for 158 days, where there was an estimated of $50 million of GDP loss. So for every country where we have shutdowns and service blocking, we do this rough estimate. It's really a rough estimate based on some economic model, but it gives an idea of what could be the harm that internet shutdown can cause to an economy.
Right. Thank you so much. I would tell you, I learned a lot, not only from your presentations, but from yesterday presenters and panel discussions. Probably I consider myself the most privileged person to be able to participate in this. I thank you both, and please join me to thank our panelists. Thank you.